Oh, gotcha.
Kate said something like that, so it's something about this dawn, so you're just above.
didn't recognize you with that.
Still here.
And your book on golf sounds really exciting too.
Oh, it's like literally shipping today. It's like shipping today.
Oh,
Yeah, it's like
good.
it's happening right now.
Yeah.
It'll be, you can get it from the press, but it'll be out on Amazon soon.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's full of poetry and, some legal history and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
I think I'm all.
And on the Native Americans playing golf, right?
Yeah, going back, it's a really interesting history.
Wow.
Hi, G.
This is like those days of teaching when, everybody, you get to say, please be seated, and everybody sits down. In real life, that doesn't always happen. Good evening. I'm Judy Ferrara, chairperson of the Stanley Kunitz Medal Committee. On behalf of the committee members, Susan Elizabeth Sweeney, give a wave, Susan, Beth, we call her Beth, Heather McPherson, Joe Fusco Jr. is not with us, he's with his family tonight, and John Hodgen. Give a wave. Where are you, John? Oh, you're right in front of me. Oh. Okay. That's right. And of course, on behalf of the Worcester County Poetry Association, welcome to the 10th Kunitz Medal Ceremony. I'd like to thank Mark Wagner, our musician, and have a wonderful announcement. He has now got a book coming out called Native Links, The Surprising History of Our First People in Gulf. And there are flyers on the table. And we're very proud of Mark, a former president of Worcester County Poetry Association. And congratulations. Tonight we have the pleasure of awarding, Jake, could we do the? Yep. Because this should be not distracting. Let me just see. Excuse me. Technology is not my thing usually. Okay. Tonight we have the pleasure of awarding the 2024 medal to Rodger Martin. And Rodger, I know that you're not comfortable with hearing applause. You're comfortable with applauding, and but this is a time when you have to just open up and accept this wonderful, wonderful honor that has been given to you, and all of these people who have come here tonight to share in this wonderful moment for you in recognition of everything you've done. Thank you all, everyone here, for participating in this celebration for Rodger, who joins 9 previous recipients whose ceremonies you have been watching on the screen. Stanley Kunitz Medal recipients are recognized not only for creating and sharing their poetry, but demonstrating their lifelong commitment to poetry by teaching poetry, and consequently, when you teach poetry, you mentor other poets. You can't help it. You inspire others. And these recipients also actively support organizations which nurture poetry. And all these actions mirror the behavior of Stanley Kunitz, in whose honor this medal is named. Deserving of our congratulations also is tonight, and also nominated for this, was poet Oliver de la Paz. And we are happy to see past Stanley Kunitz Medal recipients here tonight. Is Eve Rivka here? Because I thought she would be. No? Okay. Susan Roney O'Brien, give a wave. And Paul Slozak. And last year, Beth reminded me, and me. Let me begin with a very brief history of the Stanley Kunitz Medal, which you have just seen represented in the slideshow. We'll be seeing it again after the ceremony. And next year you'll see added tonight's festivities to the slideshow while you're enjoying conversation and cake. And my thanks again to Lynn Susi, the assistant to the executive director, for converting my PowerPoint to this file last year. Stanley Kunitz reflected on his relationship with Worcester, his birth city, and he said this: Elizabeth Bishop and Charles Olson were able to forget Worcester. I doubt that I ever shall. Perhaps it scarred me more. After shunning his birth city of Worcester for decades, Michael True, co-founder of the WCPA and first recipient of the Stanley Kunitz Medal, coaxed him to share in an inaugural reading for the fledgling Worcester County Poetry Association in 1971. Kunitz was to return for 3 decades of readings. In fact, some of them here at the Worcester Historical Museum, at this location and on Salisbury Street in the day. Does anybody remember when it was? Yes, we see a hand or two. Yes. 3 years after Stanley Kunitz's death in 2006, a bequest from his estate was secured, and WCPA board members Rodger Martin and Bob Cronin, is Bob here tonight? No, he isn't, created the Stanley Kunitz Medal proposal and formed a committee in 2013. 2 years later, in the backyard of 4 Woodford Street, the home of Carol Stockmall and her late husband Greg, under the pear tree that Kunitz and his mother Yetta planned while the house was being built in 1919, the first medal was awarded to poet, political activist, educator, and WCPA co-founder Michael True, and we remember him fondly. After the inaugural ceremony at Stanley Kunitz's boyhood home, a generous offer came from Bill Wallace, as executive director of this museum, to hold the ceremony here. Except for one inspired outdoor ceremony for Susan Roney O'Brien at the Broadmeadow Brook Conservation Center Pavilion, the Fletcher Auditorium, this magnificent space, has been open for our medal ceremony, thanks to Bill Wallace. Please, let's welcome Bill Wallace to the podium.
Thank you, Judy. And I just want to briefly welcome you all here tonight. This is what better place to be to take your place in Worcester history than at the Worcester Historical Museum. It was 41 years ago that the Worcester Historical Museum, actually it's 41. I'm not so great with math, and my math is even worse than the pictures of me. Judy and I are going to be editing that slideshow. It was 41 years ago that, thanks to the Worcester County Poetry Association, Worcester Historical Museum began its association with Stanley Kunitz. We were about to do the Water Street East European Jewish Experience exhibit, and the late Norma Feingold said, oh, we got to get Stanley Kunitz, and it was Mike True and Carl Johnson and perhaps some others who worked with her and encouraged Stanley to come and read in January of 1984 at the old museum. He read from what was then, we were using as a podium, the pulpit from Old South Church. It used to stand where City Hall is. And then he read a couple of times here, thanks to that ongoing collaboration with you folks. It's wonderful to see Worcester history alive and well, and people taking a new place in that story. So we thank you for being here. We hope you'll come again and again and again, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Next, we are going to hear from Elizabeth Bacon, who is the president of the Worcester County Poetry Association. Elizabeth?
Wow. Thank you, Judy, and all the committee members. This is such a great honor to be here to speak to you all, and of course, WCPA's greatest honor. On behalf of the WCPA, it is a great honor to speak a few words of praise, admiration, and congratulations to you, Rodger, our most deserving Kunitz Medal recipient. I am so thrilled to see so many of you here to honor Rodger. Thank you all for coming. How do we honor and extend lasting gratitude to someone who was managing editor of the Worcester Review for nearly 30 years, who traveled from Peterborough, New Hampshire to do so and bridged the rural to the city streets, who returned to Vietnam after the war, the young soldier, older now, to set up an annual and lasting exchange of words, poems and calligraphy, blossoming friendships. Who saw the WCPA through the pandemic and did not flinch. Who continues to lead the Dan Lewis Fellowship Committee, the WCPA's newest and most exciting project. Whose devotion to his Monadnock pastoral poets has become the stuff of legend, all of them adding lines to those of Emerson and Thoreau, calling out, follow trails to the top, up where the airy citadel o'erlooks the purging landscape swell, in Emerson's words. It's a thrill to be able to honor your words, your actions, and most importantly, your steadfast belief that creativity, and especially poetry, helps bridge divides, promotes healing, and is an essential aid in forming the foundation for a home each one of us can treasure. Congratulations, Rodger, and thank you for calling us all up top for the view.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Tonight's ceremony continues with a wonderful tradition. Committee members get to choose a Stanley Kunitz poem to read. First, let's welcome extraordinary poet John Hodgen.
I don't think I could add anything to what Elizabeth said. That was such a great tribute. I do want to say one thing. Rodger's been like a brother to me. It seems as if it's been forever since we were at Assumption when Denise Levertov came in for that summer workshop and terrified us to the core. We'd get there every morning, and they had, you young people won't know what I'm talking about, we had this thing called mimeograph machines. And then we'd be finishing the poem while we were standing at the machine, of course, and then feeding it in and getting our hands all blue and purple, and walked in there somehow hoping that she might find something to say, and she did. She built some foundation for us. It all started there, I think, in a way. I want to say, Rodger, when he told me this once, and he's only told me once, so I might get it wrong. When he was in college, early on, that first year, he had a professor who was pretty strict. And the assignment was to write a poem, and then the professor wanted Rodger to see him after class for what he wanted to say about his poem. And he ended up saying, this was the takeaway line. He said, "You have the eye of a poet." And if you're a college kid, that's a good day. That's not a, and you can go into a lot of dangerous places if you think, well, what if he had said, "You have the elbow of a chiropractor"? Chased him down the hall telling him what his foot was like, too. But I love what Rodger did with it. I'm making a mess of this, but I'm trying to say that he held that as some kind of challenge and a talisman to live up to in some way. He wanted to take that professor's comment as far as he could. And I've seen him be brave. He went to Vietnam and was shot over there. When he looks to write another poem, I think he takes bravery somehow. He's trying to do something brave. And I admire that. I admire it more than I can say. He calls me amigos. I keep telling him the S doesn't belong there. But he insists on it stubbornly. He's been a stubborn, dear friend for a long, long time now, so I'm happy to be here. Touch me, touch me. Summer is late, my heart. Words plucked out of the air some 40 years ago when I was wild with love and torn almost in two, scatter like leaves this night of whistling wind and rain. It is my heart that's late. It is my song that's flown. Outdoors all afternoon under a gunmetal sky, staking my garden down, I kneel to the crickets trilling underfoot as if about to burst from their crusty shells. And like a child again, marvel to hear so clear and brave a music pour from such a small machine. What makes the engine go? Desire, desire, desire. The longing for the dance stirs in the buried life. One season only, and it's done. So let the battered old willow thrash against the window panes and the house timbers creak. Darling, do you remember the man you married? Touch me. Remind me who I am.
Thank you, John. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce outstanding educator and essayist, poet, and scholar, Heather J. McPherson.
Thank you, Judy. Congratulations, Rodger, and thank you for dedicating your life to the word, the image, right? I feel as though, even though this, I don't necessarily feel as though the poem that I selected necessarily connects clearly to you or your own work, but the way that we think about image and the constant, consummate refrain of what if is just something that I think that we approach in our writing so often. The Crystal Cage for Joseph Cornell. To climb the bell tower, step after step, in the grainy light without breathing harder. To spy on each landing a basket of gifts, a snowbox of wonders, pressed flowers, pieces of colored glass, a postcard from Niagara Falls, agates, cutouts of birds, and dozing in the pile, in faded mezzotint, child Mozart at the clavichord. 3 days you fasted to bring you angels, your square-toed shoes, friends of your plodding are turning weightless. When the pear-shaped brindled cat who lives under the belfry jumps into your arms, you are not surprised by the love look in her amber eyes or by the blissful secrets she confides to you in oval, pellucid tones. What if the iron overhead suddenly starts pounding? What if outside a terrible storm is raging? What if below your twisted brother is calling? Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Now please welcome gifted poet, teacher, scholar, and creator of and director of mapping Worcester in poetry, and there is information out on the table. Beth brought the walking, driving tour. Is that what you brought? Yes. And this is a wonderful project that Beth has initiated, and it's an initiative that identifies and marks sites related to 7 nationally known poets from Worcester, and of course that includes Stanley Kunitz. And the project also nurtures new poems about the city. So let us welcome Beth Sweeney.
I'm especially eager to congratulate Rodger, because Rodger, for me, has always sort of been the Worcester County Poetry Association. I think when I first became involved with the association, it was through the Worcester Review, and Rodger was the editor. And later, I also am very aware of Rodger's sort of warmth and gallantry and kind of like gentle encouragement as the president of the Worcester County Poetry Association. Partly because of my teaching schedule, I've only made it to the Monadnock Pastoral Poets, I think twice. So I think I've earned like 2 stripes. But I have them, and I'm going to add to them eventually after I retire. And also, unlike probably many people in this room, I've also seen Rodger teach. And in particular, I may be one of the few people, I know there's one other person here who has also seen Rodger address a whole auditorium full of young writers at the Worcester County Young Writers Conference by singing to a stuffed dog. So I'm especially grateful also for Judy, not only for like organizing this event so superbly every year. Those of us who are on the committee with her know that she does like almost all of the work, and we sort of try to do our share, but Judy has almost always already done it. And so she just does everything superbly. And so one of the superb things that she did tonight was when she introduced me, she sort of mentioned mapping Worcester in poetry, which I was thinking I would sort of like clumsily mention myself, and now I don't have to, because it's part of the reason why I chose the testing tree. I love the testing tree. It's also a very long poem, and I realize it's like much longer than the other 2 poems you've heard today. But it has to do with mapping Worcester in poetry, because we have 2 tours for Stanley Kunitz. Only one has been published yet, and it basically leads from the Kunitz mural outside Polar Park up to 4 Woodford Street, and it follows, part of it sort of has the sort of organizing principle of the tour is to follow Kunitz's walk home from school as he describes it in the testing tree. So that's partly why I wanted to read this. But it's a sort of multi-part poem. The testing tree. On my way home from school, up tribal Providence Hill, past the Academy ballpark, where I could never hope to play, I scuffed in the drainage ditch among the sodden seethe of leaves, hunting for perfect stones rolled out of glacial time into my pitcher's hand. Then sprinted lickety-split on my magic heads from a crouching start, scarcely touching the ground with my flying skin as I poured it on for the prize of the mastery over that stretch of road, with no one, nowhere to deny, when I flung myself down, that on the given course, I was the world's fastest human. Around the bend that tried to loop me home, dawdling came natural across a nettled field riddled with rabbit life, where the bees sink sugar wells in the trunks of the maples, and a stringy old lilac, more than 2 stories tall, blazing with mildew, remembered a door in the long teeth of the woods. All of it happened slow, brushing the stick seed off, wading through jewelweed, strangled by angel's hair, spotting the print of the deer and the red fox's scats. Once I owned the key to an umbrageous trail, thickened with mosses, where flickering presences gave me the rite of passage, as I followed in the steps of straight-backed Massasoit, soundlessly heel and toe, practicing my Indian walk. Past the abandoned quarry, where the pale sun bobbed in the sump of the granite, past Copperhead Ledge, where the ferns gave foothold, I walked, deliberate, on to the clearing, with the stones in my pocket changing to oracles, and my coiled ear tuned to the slightest leaf stir. I had kept my appointment. There I stood in the shadow, at 50 measured paces of the inexhaustible oak, tyrant and target, Jehovah of acorns, watchtower of the thunders that locked King Philip's war in its annulated core under the cut of my name. Father, wherever you are, I've only 3 throws. Bless my good right arm. In the haze of afternoon, while the air flowed saffron, I played my game for keeps, for love, for poetry, and for eternal life after the trials of summer. And I'm just going to stop for a second, one of the breaks in the poem, to remind you that Kunitz was a pitcher. He was a baseball pitcher in high school and before that. In the recurring dream, my mother stands in her bridal gown under the burning lilac with Bernard Shaw and Bertie Russell kissing her hands. The house behind her is in ruins. She's wearing an owl's face and makes barking noises. Her minatory finger points. I pass through the cardboard doorway, askew in the field, and peer down a well where an albino walrus huffs. He has the gentlest eyes. If the dirt keeps sifting in, staining the water yellow, why should I be blamed? Never try to explain. That single Model A, sputtering up the grade, unfurled a highway behind where the tanks maneuver, revolving their turrets. In a murderous time, the heart breaks and lives by breaking. It is necessary to go through dark and deeper dark and not to turn. I am looking for the trail. Where is my testing tree? Give me back my stones.
Thank you, Beth. Tonight, in addition to receiving the Stanley Kunitz Medal and certificate, an honorarium for $300, his souvenir program, and broadside, Rodger Martin will also receive an honorary lifetime membership, which was voted on by the WCPA board last year and given to Carl Johnson, Fran Quinn, Susan Roney O'Brien, Eve Rifka, Tony Brown, Paul Slozak, and myself. And now, Rodger. For the record, whether in New England, Great Britain, or China, Rodger's mission is to bring poetry into the public arena. The Worcester County Poetry Association grew and prospered under his leadership as president, board member, and committee member. He served as managing editor, as Elizabeth has reminded you, of the nationally recognized journal, The Worcester Review, for almost 3 decades. As a devoted volunteer, his work in poetry communities in New England exceeds the highest standards demonstrated by medal recipients. Born in Pennsylvania, Rodger Martin spent his childhood in England, served as combat engineer in Vietnam, and is a journalism professor at Keene State College in New Hampshire, where he resides. He has won an Appalachia Award for Poetry and a New Hampshire State Council on the Arts Fellowship for Fiction. Simply put, Martin has earned the right to be called a citizen, poet, and literary champion of the world. A 7-time recipient of the Bruce Kellner Monadnock Fellowship, Rodger mentored poets through a series of cultural exchanges between Monadnock pastoral poets and writers, including a collaboration among poets, colleagues from Keene State University, and pastoral poets and calligraphers in China. He was co-director of the New Hampshire Poetry Out Loud program, and for 28 years, he led a poetry reading series at Del Rossi's Trattoria in Dublin, New Hampshire. And how many of us were invited? Look at the hands. It was such a pleasure. And plus, we had a wonderful meal. It was just great. Rodger's publications include 4 books of poetry, most recently, All the Tea in Zhonghua, and The Battlefield Guide, and other books are offered for sale tonight. He currently serves as co-editor for Hobblebush Books' Granite State Poetry Series. Rodger, would you join me up here so that I can proudly give you the Stanley Kunitz Medal?
Thank you. I've been practicing this for 4 months, and it's not getting any easier. First, let me thank my family and friends and all who have come to witness this evening. Let me thank the Worcester County Poetry Association, the Stanley Kunitz Medal Committee, who decided to award the 2024 medal to me, and the Worcester Historical Museum for hosting this annual event. Something I'd add about, I want to thank Mark Wagner. You might not know this, but Mark was president when we got the bequest of the Poetry Association, and at that time, the will was being contested by Kunitz's family. And there would likely have been no endowment if not for Mark's extra efforts to contact a lawyer he knew who managed to work with the family, and the Fine Arts Center also was in that fight because their endowment was also being fought. I think that's where it really began, because without that effort, what we did later couldn't have happened. So thank you, Mark, for that. Most of you don't know the profound impact this man had upon me over the past 52 years. It began in 1972 when I saw an ad in the Worcester Telegram and Gazette about a WCPA board meeting at the Worcester Public Library at 4 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. Public welcome. I had just begun teaching English at Narragansett High School in Templeton. Poetry was already in my blood, but that blood ran hot, cold, and sometimes thickened into an almost lukewarm jelly as it worked its way through my young poet body. And so I appeared at that meeting, and there met the architects of this organization: Mike True, Sam Backrack, Fran Quinn, Christy White, Corinne Bostick, Carl Johnson, and so on. But each time the name Stanley Kunitz came up, there came a palpable softening awe in the voices. Who was this poet who could elicit such reverence? I was a returning Vietnam veteran, still clumsily trying to integrate the pieces of that experience with the life I was living here. Likewise, Worcester called to Kunitz, and he came for his birthday celebrations every 5 years. I came to them all, not to meet him as much as to observe him, study from a distance this man who could generate such reverence among scholars and poets, and who finally became, to me, the ideal image of poet, committed not only to the word, but to create physical places like the Poets House in Lower Manhattan, the Fine Arts Center in Provincetown, and with the help of Greg and Carol Stockmall, the Stanley Kunitz Boyhood Home here in Worcester. All places where the word could thrive and teach others to sustain and carry on that commitment to the word. There are so many stories I could tell, but let me talk about one incident observing Kunitz, which radically changed how I understood poetry and the language to this day. It was the year the Library of Congress named Kunitz U.S. Poet Laureate for the second time, and he was here in Worcester to help celebrate. The TV networks were here, and my job was to make sure he got to his reading at Becker College on time and in good health. We did so, and I stood aside the podium where he spoke the poem we've already heard tonight, and he was singing that evening. As he spoke, the poem touched me, particularly the lines, "What makes the engine go? Desire, desire, desire." It recalled a memory from childhood in Amish country, Pennsylvania, where I had picked up a newly hatched cicada, which, when it hatches out of its old shell, its new shell for a brief moment is translucent. You can actually see the organs working inside that cicada before the shell hardens and darkens. Hearing Kunitz do the same thing with seemingly everyday language, making them translucent again, changed how I perceived the poet's work. The poet must take our words and rehatch them, make them translucent, so that one can see the organs inside those words live again. And so tonight, you have honored me with the privilege of linking my name with his. For me, there is no greater prize or privilege, and I thank you all. I have a reading of some poems. I've tried to tie as much as I could to Kunitz from my work. Some of these things, at least one of them, a couple I've never shared before. This is the broadside poem, Pondicherry Winter, for Stanley Kunitz. And if you know Kunitz's work, you'll see the references pretty clearly. And if you don't know his work, hopefully you'll just like the poem lines on their own. Pondicherry Winter. The frost is short-tempered, my dawn. Snow crunches beneath weary boots, and trees creak against the nip of breeze. Somewhere, a report cracks the silence, a maple squeezed too hard by the cold. I trudge a quarter century behind from one of the tribes less taken with vortex. Swaddled with comfort, drowsy in warmth, bounded by frozen windows, slow to grasp what lies beyond the glass, also thrives and is more and less than the sum of these parts. This early hour from the pond, under the thick ice, sonorous mellifluous echoes undulate like a pod of polite whales waiting church breakfast. Above, vapor's curtains sweep across the glaze until they hang upon soft mounds of snow, muffling the shore of this rhymed garden. The realm of the ice spirit, who has passed through many names. He announces his own, and with majestic wave and wing, silences the wind and brings the unveiling of miracle. Great flocks of heat rise as if translucent white starlings. They carve and curve into and out of each other, a thrum of transparent migration toward that pale, that distant sun. Before I read my next poem, I'm going to read a poem by Kunitz, which actually inspired that poem. And again, most of you would know this. It's the portrait. That reading occurred in this room in, I believe, 1990. It was his 90th birthday. And it was another instance of almost listening to him create a vision. So the poem he was reading at that time is called The Portrait. My mother never forgave my father for killing himself, especially at such an awkward time and in a public park. That spring, when I was waiting to be born, she locked his name into her deepest cabinet and would not let him out, though I could hear him thumping. When I came down from the attic with the pastel portrait in my hand of a long-lipped stranger with a brave mustache and deep brown level eyes, she ripped it into shreds and without a single word slapped me hard. In my 64th year, I can feel my cheek still burning. And the poem that I wrote about this in 1990, or that is not, this is the first time I've ever read this publicly. It's a harsh poem, okay? Combines two periods, being here and being back. I think you'll understand it. Flashbacks. Kunitz 90th birthday party and reading, Worcester Historical Museum, Worcester, Massachusetts. The wagons still wagon, still red, circling this 100 near, this coming of comet, this metamorphosis into word. Was it the mother that slapped him hard the sting so hot it vaulted a soldier back 30 years, where he too quickly recovers from the slap of shrapnel, and the coy girl allows him to toy. Will there be days enough? At 19, the body's quick, hard, apt as rifle. The morning, in spite of himself, he heals, comes. In 2 hours, he'll chop her back to war. She unbuttons her blouse, breasts, small fruits, nipples dark, tangy as pears. Golden in a Woodford Street garden. Kunitz, pelagic mortal, closed his book, tears in his eyes. Who are we? Why are we here? The cake is crowned with an open volume, its leaves icing thin as silk, like her silk. The girl gathers herself, stands tall, then lowers her black trousers. Time arrests itself. Flaming scars lace the skin of her crotch, her inner thighs equally slashed. Suture or razor, bayonet or glass, which side? It is enough to know the Father. At last, we met her gaze. I'd like to think he held her, cuddled her through, but he turned and left. Who are we? Why are we here? This next poem is actually one of the first poems I wrote after I came to Worcester. It's called Night Drizzle from the Old El Morocco, and if some of you were around, it was published in the Little Apple in 1982. I really miss. You've heard reference to Del Rossi's? Well, the El Morocco was, in my opinion, the Del Rossi's before Del Rossi's. It was just Greek food. Night drizzle from the old El Morocco. The city revolves under mist. An old freight throbs through the rail yard at the foot of the hill. Wheels screech against steel to the drive of the diesel under the bridge and away. Autos splish-splash pavement hymns that echo against the squared glass buildings by the far tracks. Distant relations to the triple-deckers here. Over there, a church's unruly spire pokes holes in the worship of cash and protection. Here, supple human lovers of human walk, sleep, spit together, revel in the coal dust, bask in the scraper's light, fling their day nights, their catacombs in treated water. I am Worcester, they shout. I am city. And if they hate, it is hate at the end of the circle. That might talk to this time as much as it talks to that time. This next one I'd like to dedicate to my daughter, who's here, and to what I always call my older brother and sister, Russ Hay and Peggy Day, who came up from Pennsylvania, who were with us in England. And we went for a hike on Hay Bluff in the Brecon Beacon in the Wales. Most of us know about Hadrian's Wall between England and Scotland, but there's another wall that the Romans built between England and Wales. It's called King Offa's Dyke. It's an earthen wall the Romans built to keep the Welsh barbarians out, or according to the Welsh, to keep the Roman barbarians out. So this is about that, an incident there. The other mention I'll mention is, if you've been there, Hay on Wye is a small town on the River Wye, and it considers itself the bookstore capital of the world. They claim to have more bookstores per cubic meter or whatever than any other place, city in the world. And they have an annual book festival, which is remarkable. And whether it's real or not, it's still wonderful to be there. So Hayes Bluff, Brecon Beacons. For Marika, Russ, and Peg. Earlier, spring mist rolled itself into graying, came down as drizzle. But now it pours, clogs buckets with rain, galoshes and sop, cats and dogs roiling in the meadows, grass shin-high and praying. Pushing us back, daughter and I, to King Offa's dike. Water swashing down our necks, trail a slither of slates beneath sodden boots. We drenched as 2 centurions, maps soaked to paste as they trudged into garrison. Where had that breaching ramble brought us, ancient hike? To lording rings in search of answers, gussets, breastplates, rusting under endless slop, leagues from Rome. Too wet to talk. And the Celts, warm in their huts and home. The trail funneled into woods, mud and dusk fast approached. Still the water came, and we slogged with it downhill into the stone town at last and a pub. Musk rose like steam. Rivulets eddied beneath our feet. Warm fire, hot broth, mug of tea. We drained among the books, wordless, in this pluck of fate, of a bloodline baptized, dipped 2,000 years. We marvel still at our luck. This next one is called Flying Northeast at Dusk. It was returning from an English teachers convention in Nashville and looking out the window of the plane. I think what I saw then, maybe it's even worse now as to the climate. At this height, in the pressure of the fuselage, I've become Jeopardy host, pushing scripts for an audience no one sees. Science for 1,000. The portal becomes microscope, its double panes a slide. And the earth out there, holy in its ghostly curve, demands an examination. Farther off, ruddy in a November setting, the sun's as disinterested in the roast of this planet as the audience in the tardigrades. If you don't know a tardigrade, they live in all of us, inside the pores. They're tiny microscopic animals that look like water bears and apparently are almost indestructible because they found tardigrades that went up on rockets into space. And when these moon-rod things returned, they found tardigrades still alive. So think about where our future might lie. So, as disinterested in the roast of this planet as the audience of the tardigrades, the empires of the mites, those water bears, mighty hosts which rise and fall among the continents of our pores while we file keratin from our nails. Like a pale skin, a sheen of lucent cloud covers the eastern coast, beneath which mankind's lights emerge, more and more like dendritic fibers posting each other, pulsing with synapse. It's a new growth, this current cellular mold we host manifests itself, encompassing the globe. But what if this mold becomes the host, dying for Mama Earth, our MILF? After all, she's a clothes tree, modeling her latest fashion, us, checking the fit. And there's piles of old design, strata stacked in the corner. On North Road, where my writing house is, I often walk down just for the road, and there's always litter. And so I pick it up because I can't stand to go for a walk and then see litter on a rural road. And one day I just thought, I should do something productive with these beer cans and trash I pick up. So I made a list of everything I picked up and thought, can I make this into a poem? There are 18 references. It's called Policing North Road at 18. His long trail, now 2 roads diverged in yellow woods. The Red Bull with banded horn, devoid of energy, rests with that little nip Jack Daniels inside the pasture fence. And she of Newport, an empty package, puffs next to a bush, listless as Narragansett at low tide. But what does Jenna see on the other side? A craft to harpoon Sam Adams? A rolling rock? Regardless whether Heine can or can't, Smutty knows even a St. Pauli girl would not drink White Claw sparkling water from a can, which makes Bud wiser than Bud Light. Somebody let slip about the dog poem. Yes, I've had dogs, and they all have become writers. I had Barley, who wrote lyrics to songs, which I translated into English, and apparently somebody heard the song. I've had Rory, who was a short story writer, and Roy wrote a short story during the COVID break. And our most recent was Molly, the English setter, Molly writer. And she wrote poetry. We just lost Molly a few weeks ago. But this is an interaction we had over poetry with Molly Ryder. Fresh in from the whirlwind of her stroll, she leaps onto the sheets and rolls and rubs, and then, poem complete, retires to the carpet, leaving well-spaced a pine needle, 3 small green burrs, some dew from the lower lilac. She curls herself and raises one eyebrow. Well, what do you think? I carefully ponder my critique. It's good, I say. Great parallel structure. And the 3 burrs make superb layering of possibilities. But that mud print on the pillow, not sure the poem wants to go in that direction. She sniffs and looks away as if to reply, what do you know about poetry? And I'd like to close with a poem to my daughter. And Paul, too. Paul's heard this. It's called Christmas and the Other Season. It's part 2, The Other Season. This is when she was little. Out of this, in the barn, By the stall, a daughter practices again her violin, drawing a bow plucked from the tail of her horse, who will fly like Pegasus to lift her over the double oxer and the slate, if that's what it takes to keep her upright, to keep her straight, to free from an instrument music, where fingers confidently fret the neck, independently find the notes, a pitch just shy of perfect, a timing just short of exact. She skips onward with double stops, her mount perks in tune and knickers, honed on the dustings of holiday, her leather, her waxes, her string. Let them romp in these presents and sing, knowing the sway of rhythm, even perfection, cannot mind the gap or bridge the strait between those who loved her first and those whose love must wait. Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful reading. Thank you, Rodger. Before we hear from Stanley Kunitz, I'd like to thank Gary Hoare for another stunning broadside design. And I didn't send you the final one so you would see how beautiful it was just tonight. That's so great that you reacted that way, Rodger. And Mark Wagner again for his musical accompaniment. And also, John Gaumond has, he's recovering from a fall, and he has enlisted the help of A.J. Lito, who has taken over his photographer duties to create a record. And I thank you, and John thanks you, and everyone thanks you, A.J., for stepping in. And those pictures, once John does the editing that he wants to do, will be integrated into the slideshow for next year. So that'll be a wonderful thing to look forward to. And a souvenir book of the images for you as well, Rodger. And also thanks to Irena Kachi and Rob Baker from WCPA for publicizing the event, and Carol Stockmall for the Kunitz metal cake, which you are about to enjoy, I hope, and for the plaque that you see on the table outside. And also John Stockmall, who will do the honors and cut the cake. He does a masterful job. And special thanks to videographer Tim Malunzi, who is creating a YouTube presentation for the ages. And he did that for Paul and for several of the readings. So and that's why I said, for the record, let's hear all your wonderful accomplishments, Rodger. And of course, again, Bill Wallace, thank you. And Lynn Susi and the Worcester Historical Museum staff, and that would be Jake, who is taking care of all things technological for me. And after listening to Stanley Kunitz read My Mother's Pears, we asked that these people will be ready for pictures with Rodger. And AJ wants us to assemble at that wall, the big blank wall between the white door and the brown door. And that would be the former recipients rather. Carol Stockmall with the plaque, please, and Rodger. And Bill Wallace, would you step into a picture? We'll have a little nice series. And then Susan and Paul and I and Rodger and I. So that will be a nice set of kind of commemorative pictures of the evening. Please keep in mind, without nominations from people who know of a deserving poet, there could be no Stanley Kunitz Medal each year. And nominations for 2025, I can hardly believe I'm saying it, open on December 1st, so visit the WCPA website for guidelines. And if you feel that you like the way being a part of this activity was, this commemoration, everything is volunteer. So if you have time and interest, please just make some contact, and you're going to have a wonderful experience because it's the greatest group of people to work with in the world. And I have all kinds of evidence for that if you ever want to talk about that. There are plenty of opportunities to help. Finally, this is my third and final year as chair of this Kunitz Medal Committee. It's been my honor. And Heather McPherson will take over as chair next year, and I will stay on as committee member. So welcome and thanks to Heather McPherson as the new chair. Yay, Heather! And now we'll hear from Stanley.
We're back in home territory now. This next poem is called My Mother's Pears. It's dedicated to Carol and Greg Stockmall. They are the couple who occupy the house in Worcester where I was raised. And they've done a marvelous job in that house, bringing it back to its original state. And they've somewhat adopted me and converted the place into a literary landmark house. Every fall, they send me a batch of pears from the tree in the back that my mother and I planted. My mother's pears. Plump, green gold, Worcester's pride, transported through autumn skies, in a box marked handle with care, sleep 18 Bartlett pears, hand-picked and polished and packed for deposit at my door, each in its crinkled nest, with a stub of stem attached, and a single bright leaf like a flag. A smaller than usual crop, but still enough to share with me, as always at harvest time. Those strangers are my friends, whose kindness blesses the house my mother built at the edge of town, beyond the last trolley stop, when the century was young, and she proposed for her children's sake to marry again, not knowing how soon the windows would grow dark and the velvet drapes come down. Rubble accumulates in the yard. Workmen are hammering on the roof. I am standing knee-deep in dirt with a shovel in my hand. Mother has wrapped a kerchief round her head. Her glasses glint in the sun. When my sisters appear on the scene, gangly and softly tittering, she waves them back into the house to fetch us pails of water, and they skip out of our sight in their matching midi blouses. I summon up all my strength to set the pear tree in the ground. unwinding its burlap shroud. It is taller than I. Make room for the roots, my mother cries. Dig the hole deeper.
Enjoy cake and conversation. There's drinks over there and goodies on the back. So please enjoy. Thank you.